Morad, I think that probably the best way to start this talk is, let's just take a date and time. January 10th, 2018, you're at the airport in Tehran. What happened?
Well, I'll dial you back a little before then. The problem started in November at the airport. January 10 is when I got arrested. They called me in for a question and answer session at a satellite office of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And rather than enter into a question and answer session, I was grabbed, slammed against a table, handcuffed, pockets emptied, phone taken away, blindfold on, thrown in the back of a car with a bunch of guards, and next thing I knew I was wearing prison clothes and in a solitary cell by myself. And that's how this whole episode began. I had been there on a trip, as I would make a couple times a year, for a conservation foundation. I was accused of spying, and I spent the next 70 days in solitary confinement, being interrogated day and night, physical as well as mental torture, sleep deprivation. I mean, I don't like going through all of it for everyone, but it's all the kind of nasty things that you've read about or can think about, what they can do to you to try to get a confession out of you. And even when I was brought out of solitary, that's after 70 days, then I was thrown into a small room with a couple of other people. And we could never leave the cells without blindfolds on. We were allowed to go out of the cell twice a day for 10 minutes each for fresh air, always with blindfolds. But when I was put into the room with other people, to my
and we're just seeing a picture here of,
Evian prison, which you probably have heard about. It's really not a very pleasant place. And my roommates turned out to be a couple of members of ISIS. So, now you're sleeping with one eye open all the time. And that in itself was a traumatic experience. We had one member out of ISIS who pulled a slat out of the air conditioning vent and started slashing himself. There's blood all over the place. They took him to a psychiatric hospital for 1 week and then brought him right back to the room again. It's very trying. The room was tiny. And this went on pretty much for 2 years in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps prison, which is a specialized prison within the Evian complex that's run by the Revolutionary Guards, and they don't really answer to anybody.
But Morad, just stop here for 1 second. And guys, you have to remember, we're all used to speaking among our colleagues, our friends. And for all these years, he had about 8 people to talk to, and they weren't always the most enlightening. So even the fact that Morad is here, it's a little bit of a journey. Didn't you protest your innocence? I mean, what was it? They would say you're spying, and you'd say, I am not.
Yes, and what they would do is they'd tell you, if you don't confess, we're going to whip you, we'll take you out back, shoot you, we're going to hang you anyway. I mean, it was just a continual series of threats.
And this is your daughter?
This is my daughter in London, because I'm a British and a U.S. citizen, and they were trying to get me taken out of Iran through the British, which fell through at the last moment. I was actually put on a van, and I thought I was going to the airport, and I didn't, and I came right back to prison again. So that was really rough, really, really rough. And when you think you're about to be freed, and then you're tossed back in, you've got to dig deep to kind of hold your thoughts together, to hold your sanity, and be able to continue. So it's a delicate balance. It was for me of having some level of hope, but never allowing it to get too far ahead that I thought I'd actually going to go home tomorrow, but have enough of it to give me a reason to keep doing what I was doing. And I developed a program for myself when I was out of the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard prison, in the regular prison, because in the Revolutionary Guard prison I wasn't allowed to do anything. But when they, after our trial and sentencing, in the regular prison, you can see that there are photos of, that's the regular prison, by the way, not the best of conditions either. But, you know, there was a small library.
Well, some of the images that are coming up, and again, guys, we didn't run these in a sequential thing, but you'll see some drawings that you did while you were in prison.
That's right.
And, you know, I just want to take you back to solitaire. And I know all of you have so many questions, right? For every question we ask here, you think, oh my God, how did you deal with this? But you were in solitary confinement, which means you have no contact. The only people contact are injuring you.
Right.
And so you're in this cell for hours.
Right.
How did you keep your mind active?
I was kept in solitary actually for 4 months. That's a long time to be in a small room where you essentially got room to sleep and that's about it. And what I did to just keep my thoughts together was concentrate on the lines in the stone walls. And I would try to picture animal shapes in those lines. So for 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours a day, that's what I would do. I would just look at these lines and I would imagine, well, this has more of a cat shape look to it. Another corner I'd look at kind of looked like an elephant. And I would challenge myself to find more and more. And it was, in my case, it was very therapeutic. But when you don't have anything to read, anything to look at, you have to come up with something to keep your mind sane. Because you're pulled out. I mean, I was being pulled out for interrogation sessions at like 2 o'clock in the morning. 2 cells down from me, my friend, co-founder, and manager of our NGO died in custody. Later, apparently, they gave him a drug overdose or something, but he died there. And they actually showed me a video of him on a tablet in an interrogation session and threatened me with, well, you know, if you don't cooperate, we're going to do the same to you. And, you know, it does shake you up. I mean, this is someone I knew for 20 years, someone who we started this foundation with. We worked together for 10 years on it. So this was a constant challenge of where they were trying to break me down, and I was looking for ways and testing ways within myself to keep my...
This is the judge that...
he's known as the hanging judge, if you haven't heard about him. It's Judge Salavati, who never really looked at my defense papers. They asked you to write your own defense papers. You have a lawyer, which is pretty much chosen by them, who doesn't say a word in court. And I wrote a 28-page defense of myself, of which 6 pages was just about all the tortures that I'd endured. The judge has never even opened it.
But you said to me, and again, you know, just as sort of being honest about our relation, he's actually a neighbor of mine in Connecticut. We live almost walking distance, so we've had this conversation, and you told me that the judge knew you were innocent, the guards knew you were innocent, but they still went through the charade. So what was it that they wanted? What was the value? And how could they even, I guess he didn't look you in the eyes. How do you look an innocent person in the eyes and say?
Well, in Iran, unfortunately, it's become somewhat of a business. to take U.S., British, French, a variety of different nationals or dual nationals for that matter, and use them for bargaining in whatever, dark diplomatic plans they have. In our case, it was, there were 5 of us who were, initially there was just 3, and then 2 were added at the last minute. But we were used as a bargaining tool with the United States, wherein ultimately the Biden administration agreed to unlock $6 billion of frozen funds, the Iranians' own money, but those funds could only be used to buy medication, drugs, and food. And the money would never go to Iran. It would be kept with the Qataris, and the Qataris would actually purchase the goods, and the goods would then go to Iran. And that was the deal that got us out.
This was in September of this past year, so it's been about half a year since you've actually left prison. I guess one of the things I'm most amazed by you is that I know you think about it a lot, but you said you sleep okay and you don't actually think about it when you sleep. And I've heard prisoners of war from like Vietnam, and the people who survived went on to great things because there was a certain resilience. Mm-hmm. What do you think there was about how you approached it during and after that's kept you sane?
To be honest with you, I mean, the part coming out of the Revolutionary Guard prison.
And this is you being released with...
Yeah, this was in Doha, in Qatar, when we first got off the plane from Tehran. But in the main prison, which there were about 500 people, and we could intermingle, and there was, as I said, there was a little library, there was a little woodworking shop. I developed a really rigorous program for myself. I would be up and about by about 7 o'clock in the morning, and I would begin either sketching, go out for some exercise, and spend a good part of the day in the woodworking shop. I made a bunch of wooden sculptures. I designed, I think, 40 carpets, the designs of which I smuggled out. And my wife, who was in Tehran at that time, they put a travel ban on my wife to apply additional pressure to me. So she wasn't allowed to leave for the full 6 years either. And I had those designs, my rug designs, actually woven in tribal areas. And my wife would call the guy, and we would conference on the phone from the prison phone, and I'd tell the guy what I wanted to see. But until 7 o'clock in the evening, I did not have any spare time. And in reality, more than anything, that's what allowed me to keep my sanity. For one thing, you're thinking of art, nature. Both are things of beauty. They're peaceful, and it calms you down, and it gets you away from the frustration, hatred. You're wanting revenge. I mean, all the negative things that you are faced with when you're put in prison for no reason. But nevertheless, almost 6 years is a very long time to be dealing with it. And there were multiple attempts by the United States government to get me out. For one reason or another, they failed. Some I more or less knew about that they were trying to do, others I didn't. But every time it got close and it didn't happen was another drop. So just emotionally, you, as I said, you cannot get too hopeful, but you have to retain some hope. Otherwise, you're just not going to make it. Or if you do make it, you're going to come out a basket case.
Well, we'll talk about Post because the area we live in Connecticut. It's a very first world place with first world problems. And I'm sure you've come out to people tell you how exhausted they were. They got to pick up kids, got to go shopping. you know, how do you re-engage in that life?
It's challenging. It is challenging. Your priorities, at least my priorities, change. Your engagement with people changes. As I told Richard, I hadn't spoken to more than a few people in 7 years. And, you know, this is a pretty big audience, so
It's a friendly audience. It's a friendly audience.
So a lot of these things become overwhelming. The first day that I went out to a supermarket with my daughter was overwhelming. I mean, there was just so many things that I hadn't seen for so long that I was in a daze. It was just like so much of everything. And, you know, in prison and under these circumstances, you learn you can live with very little. You don't need much clothes. You know, if you have a...
I mean, is that the silver lining? Because...
in a way, it is a silver lining because it readjusts your perspectives of what we do as a consumer society. How much we waste, how much we destroy, and the impacts. I mean, part of the reason why I got into conservation in Iran was because of the impacts post-revolution in 1979 of what had happened to the habitat and wildlife in the country. It had really been devastated, and nobody was doing anything about it. They had a Department of Environment, but nobody really cared. There was no money in it, so nobody pursued it. And that's why I first came up with the idea of doing an NGO, but I wanted it to be with local people, and there were very few people who really knew what they were doing. So
I mean, didn't that seem more the irony? You know, we've talked, and if you're a journalist, you can see, okay, I can see maybe they would misinterpret my writing, but you're trying to save wildlife in their country land. That's got to make you feel like, why would they arrest me?
Exactly. I mean, when they first said I can't leave the country, I was like, well, what did I do, or what happened? It's not that the government didn't know what we were doing. We had been operating as an NGO in conservation for 10 years. We were involved in projects with the United Nations Development Program, with the Wildlife Conservation Society, with National Geographic, I mean, everyone. So we were a known entity. We would publish, an audit and publish an annual report. When we made an annual presentation to the Department of Environment about all the projects we were doing. So we were trying to be as open and, let me put it, like Western as we could, because that's the only way I knew how to do this. And we engaged dozens of volunteers. We had 60 people out in the field on multiple projects, from bottlenose dolphins in the Persian Gulf to the Caucasus leopard on the Caspian coast. So we covered a lot of territory, and as I said, we were a very known entity. But, you know, hostage taking, unfortunately, in Iran has become a business for the government, or for the regime, I should say, and they continue to do it. They have little downside. They've almost every time they've extracted something from somebody. There aren't any real deterrents to this day. You know, sanctions really don't make a whole lot of dent in what they do. They've learned to work around them, and we see it. I mean, it's the same playbook as you're seeing in Russia today, where.
But let me ask you, because we have less than a minute, and I'm sure so many of you have so many questions that you want to ask Morad, but you have every right to feel bitter or cheated about life. You can be cynical about conservation work. I guess in conclusion, what would be your message of hope? Because you're here today and obviously you care about things.
Yes, I mean, Look, I had because she's been mentioned here before, and I showed you earlier an email. One of the people who is an inspiring person to many in the world, not just to me, that I had an ongoing pen pal relationship out of prison was Jane Goodall. I would smuggle letters out to her, and she'd write them back to a friend, and they'd smuggle them in for me. And that kind of hope, that kind of message, and knowing that people in the conservation world were caring about us in prison was really important, inspiring. And if anything, what I like to do and why I have come out and speak about this is really to tell others that, you know, you can be in a dark place. We all have had bad moments. Apart from this, I'm a cancer survivor myself. I know how bad all these things can be, but if you don't try to deal with it and dig in within yourself and to see some beauty, some peace out there that you can latch onto, you know, it could be conservation, it could be poetry, it could be music. There's so many different things that you can grasp onto that will help you climb out of that hole, but you need to do it, because even if you survive one of these bad events, you want to come out kind of charged up, ready to go, and continue with life, probably with more zest than you had before. I've been telling Richard this. Right now, I think I've overcooked everything I'm doing, because I'm doing so many different things right now that in a way I feel that I had to catch up and accelerate. So I'm working on doing an exhibition of my artworks. I'm writing a few books simultaneously. I'm working on legislation, lobbying for legislation for deterrence against hostage taking. I'm re-engaging now at a different level with the Wildlife Conservation Society. I'm here amongst friends.
And you know, I hate to cut this off because now I have a first world problem scheduling, right? But my God, how courageous. I mean, really.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.